Members of the City Council, please attend the call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 5 p.m. Tuesday, March 3rd, 2015, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry?
Here.
Dr. Edmonds? Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons? Here. Dr. Whitaker?
Present.
Mayor Wright?
Here.
Silent roll, Madam Clerk. Did you do silent roll?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you need to do a roll call?
No, she's
You've
got a
all
silent.
taken care of it? All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this, what I call the most wonderful time of the year, when we jointly, as a body, get together to discuss something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's educating our children and looking forward to a path forward to be able to understand how we can best finance and understand your needs and resources from an academic standpoint, from an operational standpoint, and a capital standpoint. And so with that, I want to welcome our new superintendent, Dr. Bracey. We had this grand affair planned for you, and you brought the snow, and we had to cancel it. So you're certainly making an entrance here, well, welcome. And Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Wright. Mayor Wright, members of council, school board members, city and school staffs, we welcome this opportunity where the two bodies can meet and discuss the current and future finances of the school system. You will see from this presentation that we are presenting a current needs-based budget to you. Priorities change from day to day and from year to year. However, we do our best to present to you our current requirements as well as the immediate future. In this budget, you will find a mixture of trying to deal with class sizes, staff shortages, and appropriate benefits and wages. We also still will submit our capital projects that need funding through the city. Hopefully, starting now and working into the future, members of these two bodies can meet and help determine a permanent flow for school funding. It would enhance the budget process. At this time, I would like to introduce the new superintendent of schools, Dr. Eli Bracey. Right now, he's coming with a lot of experience in snow days. And we got another meeting scheduled for this Thursday. And it's predicted for snow for Thursday, so we'll see how that turns out.
We'll call it now.
But Mr. Steele, our assistant superintendent, will follow with the presentation of the budget. But at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bracey.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bridgeford and Mayor Wright and members of the City Council. Definitely, this is a wonderful opportunity, as you say, for all of us to come together. My first, and I hope it's very positive. Looking forward to working with all of you, along with the school board as well. As you know, just getting on board, maybe 3 weeks or so into the fold. So, with the budget process, I've had an opportunity to work with administration and the board on the request that we're making tonight. So, with that, I feel good about the budget proposal that we're making. And at this time, Mr. Steele will go through it. I know that Chair Bridgeford, if you would, the procedure, how did you want us to do it? You want to?
I would like to try if we can give the total presentation. I'd asked Mr. Steele to keep it down to about a half hour, and then all the questions can come in afterwards, hopefully, if we can do it like that.
That's fine. All right. Well, with that being established then, Mr. Steele, will you begin the presentation, please, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Bracey.
Thank you.
Mayor White, City Council, Chairman Bridgeford, school board members. As Mr. Bridgeford said, I'm going to go through this quickly. There are about, I think, 30-some slides, so it'll be about a minute per slide, and then we'll entertain any questions. Next slide, please. This is the agenda we'll go through. We're going to talk quickly about the overriding mission and vision, talk about some demographic trends that we see that affect the school district, what the budget process is on key dates, what our current state and local revenue outlook looks right now, and as you know, we've been at the state level. They have a governor's proposed budget. The conference committee just released their budget between the House and the Senate, but we still don't have the final state budget. The budget highlights the statement of needs, as Mr. Bridgeford and Dr. Bracey said. We'll talk about those needs in our general operating fund and in our capital improvement program, and then talk about the final numbers that we were looking at with respect to those needs, and then the next steps. Next slide. This is the school's mission and vision that was established several years ago, and it does come from our 2007 to 2017 comprehensive strategic plan that the school board has. And several of the key vision statements are included here, and all the vision statements, but these particularly drove the budget formulation, including establishing high-quality graduates, establishing value-added programs, establishing the building blocks to establish exemplary student citizens, and looking at the overall maintenance and operation of our facilities and capital projects to support that education environment. Next slide. This is one of the key performance indicators everybody looks at as far as school performance, and this gives you a history of where Portsmouth has been to date. And as you know, the current accreditation is based on last year's results, so we're 1 year behind as far as what it's reflecting for this year. That last point on the slide is 32%, and then that's based on last year's scores. And as you know, a lot the drops through school districts statewide was as a result of some of the new standards in reading, writing, and science that happened in that previous year. The year before that, there was an implementation of a new standard and increased rigor on mathematics, and before that, social studies. And also in 2011-12, as far as accreditation, graduation rate was not looked at prior to that, and then that was implemented as a new criteria for accreditation. Next slide. ADM is constantly looked at because it's a prime driver for state funding. And as you can see, here's what we are looking at right now. In January 31st of this year, you can see that our ADM is up, and the state funding and revenue is determined in March. So the final figures in March will determine our final state figure for this year, but also it's forecasted for next year in developing the state model for the revenue that's expected from the state. Right now, the model is looking at 14,211. This model was developed with UVA, Weldon Cooper, and that's the key number that they use for forecasting. And of course, that's constantly adjusted through the year. Next slide. Composite index. Composite index is another factor that drives how much money Portsmouth gets for their schools, and it measures the local ability to pay for education in addition to the state funding. So what they do based on the composite index is they adjust the amount of state funding that's going to come to the locality. You can see based here that Portsmouth actually has the lowest in the area, which provides for actually a greater revenue per student than the other districts based on that composite index. Next slide. Another factor that plays into our education delivery to students includes looking at the demographics of the students that we're teaching. And you can see here, and one of those measures is the amount of students that are on free and reduced lunch, which is a reflection somewhat of poverty levels. And you can see that the percentage over the years has been increasing. This is not just in Portsmouth, but this is in other localities also. Next slide. In comparison with the other local districts, you can see in the bottom three, Newport News, Portsmouth, and Norfolk, have the highest percentages as compared to the other regions. But again, all of them have been increasing slightly over the last few years. Next slide. This gives you just a pie chart reflection of how the revenue comes in on the general fund. And you can see combining state sales tax and state school funds, you're looking at almost 2/3 of our money come from the state, about 1/3 from city funds, and a couple small slivers from other funds and federal funds. Again, this is the general fund portion. There are other federal grants like Title I that add on to this, but this is just the general fund portion. Next slide. And then here are the expenditures on general fund on where they're going. You can see, again, instruction is the predominant place where we expend funds, and between technology, operations, transportation, and administration, and attendance, and health, that does make up the other pie slivers. Next slide. Discretionary spending. Yes, in the long run, everything is discretionary, so it depends on what you classify as discretionary. But in the short run, in this particular pie chart, if we assume that payroll is non-discretionary, which is a big assumption right off the bat, and you look at just the non-payroll cost, and non-discretionary things are things like utilities and paying for insurance and those things that you may not have immediate discretion on. You look at what's left, and you're talking about 3% of our budget is in the discretionary mode. Next slide. Classroom teachers, of course, are the big component of our workforce. And over time and decreasing budgets, you can see how that's changed since the beginning of the recession, which is fiscal year 09. And another key performance indicator we always look at is what is our teacher turnover over the years. And over the last 3 years, it's been averaging about 8.1 to 9.1. You can see it's slightly rising. But again, when you look at the amount of teachers and you're looking at a 9 or 10% turnover, that's a significant effect in the classroom of having brand new teachers. That compares similar to some of our other districts like Norfolk and Hampton, but if you look at, say, Chesapeake or Virginia Beach, their classroom turnover is about 2/3 of this, probably in the 5 to 6% range. Next slide. Here's, this is a slide that came from a sister district where they were comparing teacher salaries. And I bring this up because when you look at the face of this, this may not be a good rationale to argue for increased salaries for Portsmouth teachers. What this is showing is, of all these teachers, what the entry level is, and at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. What this is they're taking the pay and classification and salary schedules from each of the districts and then laying those out. But as you can see in the footnote, this assumes that you're getting a step every year. And we haven't had a step for several years. So what happens is the Portsmouth number, if you're not getting steps, will slide over 42, and you're not getting 50 at 15 years. You're getting a lot less if you're not doing steps every year. So probably a more accurate depiction of where we are is looking at average salaries. And we pull that data from VDOE on the next slide. So this comes from VDOE teacher salary reports, and they're looking at the different districts and what the average salary is. They have a formula for looking at FTE and hours and things like that. So it does the number slightly different from the salary schedules. But you can see in this case, Portsmouth in fiscal year 2009 was the lowest, and it's also the lowest for 2015. Next slide.
Those colors.
Wait, go back. Go back. Let me correct it. Go back one slide. Okay, yeah. Go to that slide. Next slide. That way. This is starting salaries. Let me correct things. This is not average salaries. This is starting salaries. So if you went back to this first slide, before this, you saw that Portsmouth has the highest starting salary for teacher salaries. And that actually was intentional because we were trying to bring teachers in. And you can see that in 2009, we were up there on starting salaries, but we actually intentionally tried to make our starting salaries higher to bring in teachers. So in 2015, we actually do, if you look at the pay and classification schedules, we do have the highest salary in the area for the first year teacher. But going to the next slide, and this is where you're looking at the average salary. You're looking at the average salary, and this looks at the average salary of all teachers that are in your district. You can see that we're the lowest in the region when you look at all teachers' average salary. Next slide. This is a comparison so far, and these are based on superintendent submitted budgets of information we have already that look at a couple of key things. And you can, and we're always comparing ourselves to technically our competition within the area. And we're looking at the budgets, what they're doing for shortfall, what they're doing for raises, percent raise, what they're doing on health insurance, et cetera. And so far, all the districts are looking for a percent increase in raise, and some of them are also asking for more than what was level funding last year, and you've seen in the news some of the districts are even asking for tax increases. Next slide. So here's the budget process and the key dates we are right now. And again, at March 3rd, we're here with a joint meeting, but we're going to have a public hearing on the superintendent's proposed budget on the 12th. The school board is looking to adopt the budget on the 26th. And of course, on the city side, the city manager is going to be introducing his budget and going through your cycle. We are looking at the April 15th date and seeing what the General Assembly is doing. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but right now the conference budget between the House and the Senate is actually better for K-12 than the governor's proposed budget, and I'll talk about that in a little bit better. But we're interested to see what the final outcome is at the state level. Next slide. So some quick comments about the governor's versus the conference budget is there is a 1.5% raise in the conference budget, and it is about $1 million more for Portsmouth K-12 than what the governor's proposed budget is. But the 1.5% raise has some stipulations on it, which looking at starting the 1.5% not in 1 July, but later on in the year as late as January. And also it only covers SOQ formula teacher positions and SOQ support positions in the budget. And not all the positions, of course, are funded by SOQ. So when the state provides a percent budget, we look to match that not only for the SOQ, which is a requirement, but also for the other positions. So if we have an SOQ funded teacher position, we have a non-SOQ teacher position, we don't have one getting a raise and one not getting a raise. We raise both of them at the same time. The other thing that the state did is they did put a one-time VRS deposit for the teachers' retirement fund of $150 million statewide, which will improve the stability of that fund. And the per pupil state funding is up slightly. Like I said, it's about $1 million more than what the governor's proposed budget is. The other legislative impact of some legislation that's happened at the federal level that we're watching closely, and it was to be voted on last week, and it got deferred, I think, because of the Homeland Security issues in U.S. Congress, is this federal Title I portability as it relates to the No Child Left Behind ESEA legislation. And some of the legislation calls that instead of funding high poverty schools and high poverty districts, that they may assign what they call portability, and that assignment to individual students that may not be in high poverty districts or schools. In the estimation of a lot of educators and the Council of Great City Schools and others, that it would actually dilute the funding going to high poverty districts and schools. So we're watching that closely, and we're not sure what the full impact is, but right now, the way it's worded doesn't look positive. Next slide. Let's look at budget and revenue trend over time. And this is not adjusted for inflation. Okay, so with inflation, it would probably the differences would be a lot wider. But you can see that when the recession hit, there was a big dip in what was provided to school districts. The darker sections, they should be the same color, but the darker sections are the stimulus funds that were provided. And then after the stimulus ended, the revenue is reflected without the stimulus. But you can see that right now the revenue, this 140 figure, by the way, is the governor's proposed budget. It's a little bit more conservative. It will probably be about 141.6 using the conference numbers, and we're hoping that the conference numbers or higher are in the final budget. So that number will probably go up is what our expectation is. But that gives you kind of a historical view of what the revenue trend has been. most of the decreases to this K-12 is state funding. State funding for schools, K-12, statewide, has impacted schools the greatest. Not local funding, it's the state funding that has come down dramatically. Next slide. This gives you a kind of a different view when we were comparing the governor's proposed budget to the original budget, and gave you some of the indications of where things are changing to give you an idea of what the state provides on a revenue per ADM. That's what it is. So that's why we always track ADM closely, and if we're increasing ADM, I mean, that's a pretty significant impact to every child that is added to our ADM. And so far we're doing okay. It's in the positive side versus Norfolk and a couple other districts. They've taken a big dive in ADM, and they're scrambling to cover their costs. Next slide. This gives you an idea of city revenue versus the education budget, and these are total budgets. These are total city budgets and total education budgets. And I know there's been some discussion in the past of trying to decide maybe a revenue sharing arrangement, but this gives you an idea of how the education appropriation is compared to the total citywide appropriation. Next slide. When we put the budget together, there were some set things that we included in our budget right from the get-go, and these are the types of things that we included. We did not increase the employee share for health insurance. We tried to preserve the current staffing ratios and requirements for class size and mandatory things for both SOQ and over and above SOQ. Homeless transportation was included. That's kind of leveled off over the previous 3 years. That expense was increasing. It's still increasing slightly, but it's leveled off. In the past, we have not really built into the budget allocations for athletic band, and we started putting in the capacity or building the capacity rather than relying on any end-of-year funding. We tried to build it in as a real requirement that we're trying to fund. Starbase is included, dual enrollment, first college. A lot of these you recognize: summer school, freshman orientation, COE workers, New Directions uplift for alternative education alternatives, Proton Magic, and Excel. Next slide. So as we started off our new budget, we looked at the significant things that changed right off the bat, over above our previous year's base budget. And we're seeing a trend line of about 7%. This compares to some of our sister districts that are looking at percents a little bit higher and double digits. So we feel fairly good about that percent, but it did increase our requirement about $612,000. Health insurance for part-time employees. As you may be aware, with the Affordable Care Act, when we have part-time employees that are over 30 hours and they average over 30 hours, we required as an employer to offer them our employee health plan. We have about 10 employees in that group, primarily related to long-term substitutes, and that liability right now is about $80,000 if they all pick to take it. So that's kind of a conservative estimate. It might be lower than that based on who really takes the plan. And as you know, the school board approved a mid-year 2% raise that wasn't in the previous budget base, but that going forward had a requirement of $1.9 million. Next slide. We're looking at reductions in our current budget, and one, we have a DAC facility, which we do have a project uplift in New Directions, and we also have some CSEP facilities, which we provide them classrooms to. We're looking at potentially reducing our footprint in facilities, which would reduce utility costs and things like that, and some transportation costs. Another big thing are facility improvements. Right now we have over a 20-year HVAC system over there that needs replacement. If we can avoid that cost, we want to avoid that cost by getting out of the facility. We did look at and executed as part of the budget development a 15% across the board cut to discretionary non-payroll costs to non-schools of $700,000. Healthcare costs, and it's a blank there. Right now, we're pursuing this initiative, but we're looking at an on-site nurse and pharmacy program similar to what Chesapeake has executed, and they are seeing significant savings not only to the employer, to the employee, and this would potentially have an impact starting 1 January 2016. Right now, our current plan is already defined through December, but as we get the more details on that, that's a potential reduction in cost that we see that could save us money. Other revenue increases. We are looking at proposing closing the print shop. Since 2010, our print shop has actually been losing money. It's an enterprise developed fund, and in 2010 it had about an $800,000 cash balance. That's been reduced over the years, and a lot of it has to do with they have some big equipment that, to be economical, has to have a break-even point of capacity or volume going through it. Well, a lot of things have changed with technology, with a lot of our testing, and instead of paper test, everything's on computer. So a lot of the requirements in the print shop have gone down dramatically, and because of that, we don't see in the business plan them able to get to the break-even point. But we're recommending closing it before we lose even that cash balance that can be devoted. Medicaid maximization. You may know that we provide services that qualify for Medicaid. We have been getting reimbursements for some of those. In talking with a Medicaid consultant, there's other things that we can apply for that we can get federal Medicaid reimbursement for. Right now, I'm looking from other school districts. They're looking at anything from, say, a 10 to 20% increase to a 100% increase in Medicaid revenue, and we're trying to get a better estimate of what we think that we can increase as far as that revenue. So that's one thing we're looking at. Credit card payment rebate. It's our credit card. We have a credit card program, and use of it has doubled, especially for low dollar amount items. And in our financial system, instead of running a check run that produces a hard check to issue someone, we have in our requirement and our clauses in our contracts, if a vendor can take a credit card, we reserve the right to pay him by credit card. And we get approximately through the state contract a 1.5% rebate using the state's credit card program. So right now we think we're going to increase our revenue based on that and trying to maximize that as much as possible through keeping our same procurement process, but just paying at the back end with a credit card versus a hardback check. Next slide. So these next slide are over and above the base budget. We've talked about the must funds. We talked about reductions, revenue increases. Now we're talking about things that we think are important to improve the quality of education. One of the things we're looking at is providing a 1.5% COLA increase. And if the conference committee budget goes through, a lot of that will be paid through that increase through the state. 13 additional instructional assistants. Holiday pay, which currently our 10-month non-exempt employees don't get, but we would pay for them getting paid for winter break holiday. Additional instructional support, which includes 10 elementary school teachers, 3 middle school reading specialists, 6 life science 7th grade teachers. Additional ops and finance support staff that were previously cut and are being asked to be added back into the budget base. Next slide. Increase off clerical and security to 8 hours. A lot of them are on 7.25, 7.5 hour contracts. And moving them back to 8 hours based on schedules that we think can better support the schools. Academic improvement, program improvements with some key programs that we think have a high return on investment, including dual enrollment and Saturday tutoring. Increased substitute pay to regional average. These are teacher substitutes. Right now, we pay the lowest for substitute teachers in the area, and we're trying to be competitive with the pool of substitute teachers in the region. So we want to move up to at least the average. We're not asking to be at the top, but at least in the average. Restore prior cuts in academic professional development, which we think would also have a high return on investment. And also, we've been looking hard at, and we think we would get a good return on investing in a district-wide athletic director and athletic trainers. We already have athletic trainers in some of the schools, but this would complete that. Now there's a dotted line, and what we've included in here are some additional items that weren't included in some of the budget numbers that were provided earlier, but let me cover those. Increase the bus driver monitor standard work week. Currently, our bus drivers and monitors are defined in our pay system with a standard work week, no matter how many hours they work. And when you define the standard work week, that defines how much they're going to contribute to VRS, how much sick leave is going to be accrued, etc. In the past, when they were looking at the standard work week, the average work day for a bus driver and monitor was about 5.25 to 5.5 hours. Now it's closer to 6.25 or 6.5. So the bus drivers and monitors have requested that it accurately reflect the average that they're actually working, which when we do that, we're looking at not an increase to their net pay. They're not getting an increase to their net pay, but what is happening is we're actually contributing more to their VRS because the amount we contribute more accurately reflects the hours they're working. So that's where that $600,000 comes from. Next slide. We haven't had a step for several years, and that's been a constant problem in a lot of our work categories, including teachers, is that you have a new teacher come in and they're making the same amount of money as a teacher that's been here 4 or 5 years. So the teacher that's been here 4 or 5 years is saying, what's with that? So we're looking to have a step increase. Additional CSEP trade slots. We have an arrangement with CSEP both for special ed and for general ed students. And they base their budget on the number of slots that we predict will be filled for their services. And there is an identified need for about, I believe that equates to 8 additional slots that we're asking for CSEP to provide services. We're the only district in the area, school district, that doesn't have a public information officer. And we think having a public information officer will help put out good news about the district and also coordinate a lot of the communication that is needed, both on a routine and an emergency basis. Grants writer position. Again, that position was cut a while back, and we feel that a grants writer position, especially for competitive grants, we think that salary will be more than made up by, if they're a good grants writer, in the additional competitive grants that they get. Next slide. So here's how the general fund revenue picture looks. And again, that proposed figure is based on the governor's proposed budget, which is a little bit more conservative than the current conference budget we have. Again, we're looking at, for the conference budget, it being about, I think, 1.2 to 1.4 over and above that. So we're hoping that it's at least that. Next slide. So that was the revenue, and here's the expenditure side on how that's divided into the different categories on the general fund. And these are expenditures, and you see the 146 million. That's based on all those things that were previously discussed on must funds, cuts, and all the quality improvement items that were listed previously. Those are added in to come up with that 146.5. Next slide. And as you know, the general fund is just one of our funds. All these other funds are also part of the amount that is appropriated by the city. And so the total budget is would be, in this case, $174.6 million. You can see we've zeroed out the reprographics fund, and again, that's assuming that the print shop will be fund. Next slide. We're asking the city to invest in bigger wheels for our buses so we can handle the snow. Next slide. One of the areas we're concerned about is capital improvement plan. The current year, 2014 to 15, the number of projects that we requested last year was 18 projects. The value of those projects was $9.8 million. And then, of course, we submit a 5-year projection, which a lot of those projects are multi-year projects. It had a value of $31 million. The number of projects that were approved were 7 for a $1.7 million. A lot of that was taken up by the school bus purchase. The others were engineering type work for bigger projects. For 15-16, we're looking to submit 43 projects for a value in year one of $14 million, over the 5 years, $52 million. And that's where we have a lot of questions on how this is going to be accommodated. In fact, I have a meeting, I think scheduled for this Thursday, with Carol Swindell and Judy Duffy, etc. And we want to explore and brainstorm ways that we can tackle this and the best way to do it. Next slide. Here's just kind of a summary of the types of things we're talking about in that $52 million. But a lot of it is in the HVAC, and one of the biggest projects is over at Kirkland. Roof projects also, and one of the ways to improve, save your facilities is make sure your roofs are in good shape, and also that improves also on utility usage if you have good roofs and insulation. Technology upgrades, we do have a lot of our technology that's even in the schools is very aged, routers, etc. And we need basically a system-wide improvement of the backbone to our technology that's in our schools. That's where that number's coming from. Next slide. So the next steps for the schools is we're going to have a public hearing. The school board's going to approve the budget, and we'll work with the city on the best resource strategies to improve pre-K and 12 education in Portsmouth. And that ends my presentation.
Very good. Thank you. Let me first of all ask, a very good presentation, very informative, a lot of information. Can you, Mr. Steele or Mr. Chairman, someone explain to us about the allocation of our funds? I was just made aware, I think Dr. Whitaker brought it up, and I thought I heard someone on the school board prior to mention, when we switched over to categorical funding and we talked about how we would appropriate funds and getting together quarterly and having you have the latitude to be able to make adjustments, because we knew we wouldn't nail it perfectly in our first year of what goes in what category. How is that relationship that we set up prohibiting you from using funds to do something? I'm concerned about that, because that was never our intent, to make sure that you had the latitude to do what you wanted. And I think, as was mentioned in our last meeting, it would be more of a formality with you coming to us, letting us know you had to move money from some category over to another until we got it correct. And I want to make sure that we're not putting a burden on you, and make sure there's not some stress that you're having to endure because of something we're not doing on our end. And I'm not familiar or clear on that. So can somebody explain that to the whole council?
I'm going to defer that to Mr. Steele, since that is his department,
okay.
And that way there's no misinformation going out. Okay. Mr. Steele.
Let me start off by saying I think the initial objective for establishing the category of funding was to have a handle or monitor the spending for unintended purposes, and especially monitor to make sure there was no misappropriation. Since then, I think the argument from the school is that we've provided a lot of those controls. We provide monthly reports. we have a very sophisticated ERP system, just like the city does on Munis, where we load the budget that the city approves with the ordinance into the financial system, and those budget controls and budget checks are built into every transaction that we do. So it's not even by categorical category, but it goes down to the individual account line. So we can't exceed those limits without, you can't issue a requisition or a purchase order or do any transaction without the transaction being rejected because you're over budget. And then you would have to do some action to accommodate that. I can tell you the Virginia Department of Education has formally put out to both school districts and localities, encouraging localities to give the flexibility to school districts for lump sum appropriation of the funds. So they've come on board and acknowledged that that provides flexibility to school districts. At the beginning of the year through about the midway of the year, we don't have too many issues with categories because July, August, of course, if you straight line things, we don't have that many expenses until all the teachers come back in September, August. So we're basically starting to catch up to the spending as we get into, say, 2/3 through the year. But at that time, then it becomes a little problematic because our budget was created several months or almost a year prior to that. It was a plan that we had to spend. And forecasting out a year to know what you're going to be spending on, a lot of things change. You have snowstorms, you have all kinds of things that affect, those categories, and you have to make adjustments. Last year we made some adjustments, and City Council went along and approved those. The process, though, takes time, and especially when you're waiting for approval of that, you're holding maybe some critical priorities from being spent until the appropriation is actually done. And that's where we lose flexibility. And one of the things that is in the ordinance right now is a requirement to do categorical funding for grants. I mean, that's not even taxpayer money from Portsmouth. It's, say, federal money or whatever, but we're levied with a categorical restraint on it for money that is not even in our control or your control as far as what we get. So, and as far as grants go, with the sophistication of, say, the Omega system on federal grants and other grants, they're controlled down to the line item, not just the category. So we could never, do anything with grants that either overspends or is not in approval with the grantor. The grantor tells us where we can spend the money. And so it seems odd that we are under a categorical constraint at the city council level, for a city ordinance on grants. So those are the types of things that cause us some problems, especially as we get toward the end of the year. And we want the nimbleness to move funds where we have a criticality. The March ADM comes out in March. We really don't know it until April. So we may not know the final state figure until April. And then we have to, based on whether it goes up or down, we have to start making some adjustments really quick toward the very end of the year. And that's the type of flexibility we don't have right now.
Okay, thank you. Question, Dr. Wood?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Steele, for the information. I didn't realize the impact of it on the grant side of it, which our funds, as we mentioned, aren't even in our control. I think that as the council, we should. I think at our last meeting it was mentioned that we can't act on this until the new fiscal year. I think that that's something we should definitely go back to. Given what the school board has just told us, that it is placing a burden. And also, if I heard him correct, VDOE is recommending lump sum. And as I mentioned to council, it's a monitoring issue, and that can be done between the superintendent and the city manager, just updating and informing, and then just addressing that issue to council, not for a vote, but just for informational purposes.
And if I may interject, we have changed the way we've done our financials so they're more transparent than before. I think the last time I asked when we had given you all copies of it. I think we had done the first 3 months. You said that was really what you need for the monitor. I think the main thing was to see if it was something that you can monitor and keep track of. And with the new financials the way they are, I think that provides that. At least everyone agreed that it was a lot better than what we had. And I think that was a key to it once they went through and changed the financials when Mr. Steele came on board and Ms. Deutsch. They have provided a lot of changes to where the financials are a lot more transparent and you can actually see a major change you could definitely see in a month's time.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Vice Mayor.
I have 4 questions, just because I don't know. First of all, what is a COE worker?
That's a part-time student that works part-time assisting in the schools. I think we have about, looking for maybe confirmation, but we have about 18 part-time positions.
So they're actual students working in school, like in the cafeteria?
Part-time. They're not working in the cafeteria. Typically offices, things like that.
Okay.
And it's supposed to provide some work experience, etc.
Okay. To the print shop, can't we consolidate print shops and make sense?
You don't.
So if you close yours, where do we get our printing done if they close theirs?
They print our budget and our CAFR. We would just get it done on the economy.
So it's less expensive, just outsource everybody is what we're saying. Okay. And
Is it, I heard an answer, that is,
It's getting more expensive, and I think a lot of things the city used to do, they don't do anymore. At least not with us, because I think you found a cheaper price.
Well, I know in the statistics that we have, and looking at the business volume, the city volume has also come down. So either you're digitizing or you're doing something else, but that volume has come down.
That is true. We don't print as many CAFRs and budgets because people want it electronically.
right, you get a.
Yeah. Put it on PDF and
yeah.
everybody gets it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what is Medicaid revenue for the school? I really got lost there.
Well, there are
What do
some
you do that
services. There
Medicaid
are
pays
some
for?
services we provide to Medicaid eligible students, and that could include everything from transporting a student, etc. And those type of services, including, say, occupational therapy, speech therapy, a lot of those things that we provide those services to, those are eligible for Medicaid reimbursement.
Thank you.
I'm done. All right, Ms. Meeks.
We still have the program with the homeless children, and last year y'all had a cost in y'all's budget for that.
Yeah, we had to add last year.
Is that under Medicare too?
Actually, there is some transportation that is covered by Medicaid reimbursement, but most of that transportation that we're talking for the homeless is not Medicaid reimbursement, but it is required by the McKinney-Vento Federal Act that we have to provide that transportation.
On page 4, obviously it answers one of my questions here. What was the budget that the city gave us? It's later on here. But I asked Dr. Whitaker, when was the year they changed the math?
11, 12.
2011.
11, 12. That's when we fell. I mean, that's when the accreditation came in because I think I was told that they were looking at it one way. They added the math and it made a lot of the schools just drop. I mean, fell. But normally, if they would have left it like it was, we would have passed. Is that correct? Is that right?
Yeah.
Look like we're on the free and reduced. We're increasing by 1.2% on page 7. Is that due to economic times or?
Yeah, I would guess it's because of economic times. And again, it's not just Portsmouth. Throughout the state, the percentage, and actually through the nation, the percent of free and reduced eligible students has been increasing.
Are we keeping the same number of students? Around about, I mean, what is our number of pupil now?
If you go back to the ADM chart, you can see how that's changed over time. Recently, it's been fairly steady. And you can look on this slide, it tells you the total free and reduced
Yeah,
eligible.
97. But I didn't know if our population, our student count went up or down.
Since 2008, we could go to the ADM slide. I think that on page 5, that kind of shows you how the ADM changed.
So went up with us. All right. On page 10, we were talking about insurance. We did self-insure?
Yeah, we're on that now.
Our self-insurance started 1 January, so we're just starting.
Are we living up to our obligation that we promised y'all that we will fill if any shortage, if there is one?
Yeah. So,
Too much is,
we really don't have enough.
There's no shortage yet.
hopefully there's a shortage after 2 months.
Hopefully I have to do that.
Oh, yeah, good, yeah.
We'll know better after.
We would be in trouble after 2 months.
Yeah, we're gonna be in trouble.
I just want to make sure the obligation is still
If
there.
that's the case, why are you thinking about a 7% increase?
Yeah, that's.
Well, fortunately, our plan year is different than our fiscal year. So our plan year runs from 1 January to 31 December. So we already know what our costs are for the first half of the fiscal or the calendar year, which is already funded in this current year. What we don't know, and we know what our second half is for July to December because that's our plan year and that's already set. What we don't know is what the new plan year will be starting in January of starting 2016 through June of 2016, and that won't be set until later in the year, but our trend data seems to indicate 7%.
That's all I got, man.
Ms. Moody?
What's the difference between a band and an athletic band? Is that something new, or is that you had that as one of the items?
It's two different.
Got back athletics last band.
Page 22.
It's two different things.
Oh, okay, it's just athletics /
Two
band.
different organizations.
Two different things.
Is that a band that's in good shape? Or-
Well, I mean, we distinguish the support to
Or
our
pep rally
band
band.
for band equipment and uniforms, different than, say, athletics and their equipment and uniforms.
So this
Combined,
is
we were looking at increased allocations to both of those elements for both high schools and middle school.
but this is up and beyond the bands that we normally marching bands.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
He's thinking that those are both
Okay.
bands.
Yeah.
He's thinking they're both.
Oh, no,
One is athletics and one is the band itself.
Athletics separate.
I got you. You lumped it together.
Yeah, I just
Also-
put slash.
Also, what would a trainer do at the schools? What would their job be? Athletic
I'm
trainer.
looking for someone to help me on that, but we do already have trainers in the schools that help with athletics, both for training to avoid injuries and things like that, also for injury identification, what the say a training regimen can be to improve the condition or things like that.
It's like sports medicine.
So this is up and
Someone
beyond
might be more
phys ed.
knowledgeable on that than me, but
Isn't it more for sports? Don't you have to have trainers at all of your sports
All of our sports, and
games
actually we
for
have-
injuries, for early identification, concussions, wrapping ankles, wrapping arms?
So a trainer was a quasi-doctor that can detect a concussion and
assistant. We do
Right.
have a partial requirement that we get assistance from bond secures that we have an agreement with, that they help support those services through bond secures.
but they support the medical services, not the physical training.
No. Are you talking about like athletic training?
Yeah. What's up here? Athletic trainers.
They're more on the medical side, not
Okay, like
weight room,
sports,
what's gonna
sports
monitor.
medicine.
Right.
And most of that is part-time. It's not a full-time athletic training requirement. Most of that cost is 108 with the athletic director.
Okay, that's mandated.
VHS.
Yes.
Anybody else? Question?
So as far as the budget that you're presenting, you're presenting level funding at the same amount that was funded last year, and that's creating a $6 million gap.
Actually, we're probably looking at a 4.8 or 4.9 million gap based on what, if I had to guess, based on level city funding right now and conference budget numbers that are in the House Senate budget that is currently presented. So again, the state is still uncertain. If we went with the House Senate conference number and we went with level funding city, we're looking at 4.86 million.
Where's that at? Which slide is that? So
If you look at 29. This is the total requirement, and that's an expenditure number. The revenue figure that was shown later was being conservative at this point, so it's just showing the governor's proposed number. But I can give you the number that if you use the House Senate version, it's $141,656,353. That number is the House Senate number plus a level funding from the city. That would produce a gap of 4.86 million.
I guess I would want, since you don't know what's going to happen until you come out of conference and they agree, what are we looking at on both one on a piece of paper so we won't have to listen to that? If we give you level funding, and if we go with the governor's budget, you're going to be short how much? And if we give you level funding and you go with the conference side, how much? You're going to be short either way?
Yeah. The difference is about 1.2 million between the House Senate conference and the governor's. So you would add 1.2 to 4.8. You're basically looking at 6 million difference if you went to the governor.
So Dr. Whitaker.
Because on page 28, that's where you're showing your level funding.
That's level funding and the governor's proposed funding.
Right. So that's that 6 figure. So did you come in here this evening with a level funding to pacify, or I mean I don't understand why you, because I know your expenses are going up. I mean, why are you requesting the same amount that you received last year when we know expenses are going up?
I guess it's the way it's depicted, but I was showing the revenue picture as we know it right now. We don't know any different. And on the expenditure side, we tried to show what our needs are.
Okay.
So we're still uncertain on the revenue side.
Okay.
But on the expenditure side, we're saying that we have $146 million in needs.
Okay. All right.
But you.
So either way, like I said, either way it's a gap. Okay. All right.
Just make sure.
Yeah, either way.
Yeah.
On your pupil transportation, you increased $700,000 on page 29. Is this taking in consideration price of fuel today as it was last year?
It does provide an increase in fuel as an estimate based on, say, current right now.
It's current.
A lot of that increase, though, isn't because of fuel.
Huh?
That's going to go up.
No.
A lot of that increase isn't due to fuel, though. The 600,000 that we were talking about,
The bus
10-month
drivers.
employees increasing, exactly. The
Okay, so
standard
that's
work
all.
week.
That increase is all to drivers.
Most of it is, yeah.
The 10-month employee.
Okay.
But not, I think you said not in salary specifically, but in the,
Not in net pay to them,
In-
but
in
in
the
retirement.
deferred pay to
Retirement,
them as
VRS.
far as retirement.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure we all understand what when you're saying level of funding, you were including the additional $6.4 million that the council appropriated.
No.
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yes, you are. So, Catherine, you question me on this. right? Correct.
Correct.
So the level fund is including the additional $6.4 million that you got on top of your budget for last year. So make sure we all understand what level funding is. Okay, that's why I want to get clear.
Right.
Good point.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Steele, the 146 figure for needs, does that include everything on page 25 and 26? COLA increase, the additional instructors and finance and clerical and substitute pay? Does it include beyond the dotted line, the bus drivers, the PIO and the grants writer?
Yes, it does.
So it's everything on page 28 and 29?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just so we're clear, back to what Mr. Cherry was raising, the $6.4 million, was that new monies or was that money that was reappropriated?
New money.
At the last year, there were two ordinances, appropriation ordinances. One initially for the amount not including the 6.4, and then the city council approved a second ordinance adding the 6.4 at the beginning. So they're both appropriations. They have nothing to do with reappropriations. They're both appropriations.
Short answer, that was new money.
That was new money.
Right. So, but I'm trying. It's still. I didn't understand your point as far as it.
Because when you speak level funding, you're usually talking about what was in the budgeted for the previous year.
Right.
And anything additional in that is an additional and not level. So I want to make sure that we all understood that that wasn't what was budgeted for the previous year. That was that is actually $6.4 million above
what
the
they
budget for the previous year.
Right, but you were already behind from the previous year. So because I know there's also been language that there was an increase, that the budget was increased, but you can't increase it if you're trying to catch up. So I just want to.
Yeah, just make sure we understand what the budget said and what we gave you.
Right.
The budget said one thing, we end up giving $6.4 million above what was approved in our original budget.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's all.
That's right.
From 48.
Okay. Anybody else? Can we switch over to capital projects? I'm trying to understand page 32. You talked about this year's budget. You had 18 projects that you had in, and we approved and funded 7 of them. And so now the next year's budget coming up, you got 43. Is that the delta of what we did not do last year plus additional items?
A number of the projects that were approved last year only included engineering costs. So for instance, the HVAC project at Churchill, that covers basically the A&E costs, but the actual construction costs, we're talking several $1 million. So that would be in this next round is, okay, following engineering, now we want the money for, the construction.
And I think we have in the past.
And we had a couple others like that, like the roofs. Mm-hmm. There were 2 roof projects that pay for the engineering, but we still need the money that still be needed for construction.
The people and our people have all those minute lists.
Well, that's what I was getting at. I wanted to make sure that we had the same format in the list that we've had in the past, where you have listed those projects and we've seen them all, and we look at which ones from a priority or must need, and I think we did the Norcom, and then something else that we saw, the headphones or the microphones and those types of things. Can we get that list of these 43 broken down in that matrix that we've been getting in the past?
Yeah, I've provided that in the format already to Judy Duffy. She has the list of all those projects.
Okay.
And as I think I mentioned, we're having a meeting on Thursday to talk about some CIP issues.
But when you get done, just make sure we, the council, get a spreadsheet just like we had in the past. I thought that was very informative of what we had. I mean, but any other questions? Yes.
And just for clarification, so I make sure I'm understanding this correctly, if we go to slide 20 again. So are you saying that the $52 million that was appropriated by the city for the last budget cycle did or did not include this additional $6 million?
It does include the $6 million.
So that 52 does include the additional $6 million.
Anybody else? Questions? Yes, sir. Mr. Meeks?
As far as the money being returned quarterly to the city by the school board, how much have reappropriations have they gave back when we were appropriated so far this year?
What council's been doing is taking the total amount of the local funds and appropriating it on a quarterly basis. You've done 3 quarters. No money has been turned back at all. It's all appropriation going forward.
So we've taken 52.4 million and we divide it by 4 and say first quarter, here's your check.
Well,
Second quarter,
actually,
here's your check.
their total general fund budget has been divided by 4.
Okay.
So you implemented 2 things with this budget. One, you did categorical funding. The other, you did periodic funding. Prior to that, you had a lump sum appropriation that was done at the beginning of the fiscal year. So the total budget got appropriated at one time and on a lump sum basis. They would administer their budget through line items, through categories, but your appropriation was lump sum.
Anything else? Yes, sir, Dr. Wood.
When you said the lump sum, are you saying the budget was appropriated or the amounts were appropriated? So that whole...
Both. Both. It was not done by category. It was done... The state code allows you to do it two ways. You can make a lump sum appropriation or you can do it by categories. And the state code then specifies the categories. Council doesn't have the latitude of going beyond the categories that are specified in the code.
Right. So previously, let's say the budget from the city the allocation was $100 million. You would give the school system $100 million July 1st.
It was all appropriated, yes, sir.
Okay.
And then recently we've gone to doing it by quarter, so you would get 25 million, but that still was in a lump sum.
No, sir.
And it was not. It was by the category.
Yes, sir.
So if you had a shortage in transportation of $3 million and you saw your run out over in another category, you could recover it from there. You couldn't go to that category and move it over to be able to take care of your transportation. You would have to come back to us and get approval to say we need $3 million for transportation. And that's where the hang-up has been. If there was some event or some contract or something that you needed to let or put out on the street, you couldn't do it because you knew you had a shortfall, so you had to wait till you had funding in the category before you could award it. Is that?
That's correct. And for instance, during the holidays, we had an emergency situation at IC Norcom where a boiler had a catastrophic failure. We have 2 boilers over there. One failed. They were both built at the same time. We had our own engineering firm go in, and we also used the city's firm to get a second opinion. Both of them recommend replacement of both of them immediately. We are out with an emergency procurement to replace that boiler. But again, we're scrambling because that wasn't even programmed in checking with CIP availability. We were offered the ability to take some of those other projects away to fill this or use our operating fund. We thought those were still critical, those other CIPs, so we were scrambling on our operating fund to find enough funds to pay for this emergency procurement, which right now is initially estimated at $300,000, but I think it's going to come in less.
Yeah, but if we, the city now, are controlling and operating the capital projects, why are we asking you to, well, since your boiler's out, you need to take something over here? That should be, the onus should be on us to get that boiler replaced post-haste, right? Not go and leverage something else you have to take it so it stays balanced. Is that right? I mean, from an emergent standpoint like that, we're doing that.
That's what we had to do this last time.
Well, I mean, that's part of the discussion that I was looking forward on Thursday to talk about situations like that, but also in general about all these items and projects. Are they going to be continually deferred, or can we look at some other solution? We're really looking for solutions to handle this growing list of CIP requirements.
So, Mayor, what you're saying is that we need to be involved when emergencies like that come up?
No, I think the city, we run your capital projects. If that boiler went out, you need to call us and say the boiler's out. Your guy and our guy said it needs to be replaced, and we need to take care of that. You're saying we financially are coming to you and say, well, if the boiler is $5 million, we need something over here, $5 million worth to swap out so we can take care of the boiler. And that should be something that we should be handling in our reserves, just like we would do in a rainy day fund or anything else. If it's an emergency, don't tie CIPs. If you got 10 projects and we say we're only going to fund 5, and that's what this council agrees on, then that's all we're going to do. But I'm saying in an emergency situation, if a boiler goes out, you shouldn't be having to use or trade off something else in your budget to cover replacing an emergent boiler. The city should be over there doing that. And you're saying you are?
Can I help?
Yeah, please.
I think what we have here is a unique emergency situation where you had to have a boiler replaced, repaired. You need the certification that the funds are there so you can proceed. Think about the fact that you didn't have a second council meeting in December. You reorganized in January. Your first meeting doesn't happen. And so this was a way of finding appropriated money that's ready to go.
Right.
And what Chris is saying, if I understand, is that we need to find a way. This is the first time we've ever done this. I mean, this is new for both the city and for the schools.
But my point is we are the capital guy.
I hear you.
Okay. All he need to do is say, we got a boiler out, and we should be over there taking care of that. It shouldn't be a school person or...
We have to have appropriated money.
Understand.
And that's
somebody's got to pay for it.
And it's got to be appropriated so that it can be spent. And you can either look at the operating budget, which is appropriated, or you can look at the capital budget, which is appropriated. Or you could call a special council meeting and appropriate the funds. Again,
but that was just a bridge because we would have came back and fixed it later. So we're using an anomaly,
exactly.
and it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, got it. All right, so, yes, sir.
But if the school board had the money as a lump sum, that wouldn't have been an issue because you would have already had funds prepared, available to handle something like that.
Well, it certainly will impact, and we're preparing as we get into March, looking at some categorical adjustment requests.
No, I meant at the beginning of the year, had it been a lump sum allocation, you would have had the money available to have taken care of the Norcom board.
The answer is yes, sir.
On the operating fund. Because again, it's not controlled by category; it's by lump sum.
Yeah.
You can move funds, to cover, say, a facility issue.
Right.
But we all, I mean, nothing against nobody in here, but we all know why we went to categorize budgeting and lump sum. So let's, I know it's a new board and new council, but it was a reason why we done it, and so.
Right, but it wasn't a justifiable reason, and so I'm hoping that as we move into the new fiscal year in July, that this council will have enough votes to change that so that we can take this strain off of the school system.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just for my curiosity, I want to know, does City Council receive our monthly financial reports? Do you have, because someone told me that you weren't getting them, and I just want to make sure. I was under the impression that you were receiving the monthly. In other words, at each of our board meetings, we approve the financial statements. They're very detailed, and my understanding was that you are receiving those.
I'm not getting them.
I'm not getting them. We're not getting them.
I mean, we can provide whatever other distribution you want.
What made you think we were getting them?
I think we were providing them to.
That's why I'm asking the question, because I at our last joint meeting.
Based on the agreement, we said we would provide quarterly financial statements. So every time that the school board approves the quarterly financial statements, we make sure to provide them to the CFO and the city manager.
I don't think
Those
we've
are
asked for monthly
quarterly, but he
reports.
said monthly.
I just said, I did say monthly. I thought, I was under the impression that when the board,
Be great.
when the board approved the monthly financial statement, that you received a copy, and maybe I was, obviously I've been mistaken.
I think the requirement from the city initially, and actually from the grand jury report, was a quarterly report, and we can do it on a quarterly basis. But we're also,
Well, you're doing a quarterly
we're
now.
providing a monthly financial statement, which is basically the same format. So we're already providing the monthly.
That's what I thought.
You know, both
Public information, isn't it?
It is.
It's public information, and it's publicly, you know.
And we want to be as transparent about our finances so that you can ask the right questions and.
Good idea.
I mean, if you want them monthly, we thought we would get them because she said you get them quarterly, but we can make sure you get them monthly because we get them monthly.
It's just a push of an email button.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, please.
It'd be very helpful.
Okay.
But our staffs in both offices are sitting down monthly or quarterly reconciling our statements. How is that?
We're meeting. I was meeting with Pat Fisher monthly.
Okay.
And then Pat left at the end of the year. We have a new school superintendent, and he came on board in very challenging weather.
Just got here.
And so,
Right, but besides all that, are we meeting monthly now? Because prior to, we weren't doing that. We weren't having both staff sitting down and at least having that conversation. And we met, Mr. Chairman, 3 years ago behind, when's the last time we sat down and everybody was looking at each other like, well, I don't know. And we had to reintroduce ourselves to each other. And that's what we said we did not want. So if it's monthly, that's what we want. Whether we do it, you need to do it, and we just need to be on copy.
We are.
Okay.
Except for the little hyphen there between
the snow and the transition.
Yes, sir.
Right. Got it. Okay. All right.
Great.
No questions? All right. Thank you. Anything else from our school board members? All right. Thank you very much.
Get good kids in school.
Absolutely. No more snow.
Well, thank y'all very much.
Don't jinx it.
Good luck on that.
Good plan to do.
I know. 3 to 7 coming Thursday. 3 to 7.
She showed me. Yeah. You got 3 to 7? I got 4 to
Last
6.
night when I went to
We
bed.
do want to invite you, if you would. There's a 7 o'clock city council meeting. Sure, you don't get enough drama in your meeting, so if you like, you can hang around and help us out.
More drama.
That's right.
Yeah, show him.
What did you say, Pastor? I'm going to be with you, right? Goodbye.
Nice.